really fun. Now I'm very happy to bring up Jonathan Gottschall, come up, our wonderful guest speaker. Can we all please give him another round of applause? You have written books that affirm our entire venture as writers. You affirm it, you empower us, you make us really feel like we have a social purpose, we have a human purpose in doing it. You give it scientific legitimacy. Thank you so much. Your award is the Social Impact Award in honor of outstanding research and insight that affirms the power and promise of creative written expression.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I had two big impulses coming in here. Actually, I had one big impulse. And the impulse was like, I was going to come in, I was going to do my little talk, but I wanted to say something like thankful, so express my gratitude to Writopia for having me in. And that's not hard for me because writing is for me, good writing is for me, truly one of the things that makes life worth it. One of the most precious things there is. And so Writopia is doing the Lord's work. And I was glad to be part of it. I'm glad to be doing for once the Lord's work myself. And I believe it's Jesus Christ himself looking down approvingly upon us here. My second impulse, though, came when I walked in the door and sat down in the front row for a little while. I was kind of gathering myself, thinking about what I wanted to say. I started seeing these little blurbs from the stories come up. And I got fascinated and mesmerized, and I sat there for about a half hour, drinking increasingly heavily as I looked at these little blurbs. And the thing it reminded me of was last summer, I reread almost all of Nabokov. And if you're a writer who reads Nabokov, it's sort of like if you were a professional basketball player who was a snail, right? You're a snail, you're this tall, and you watch LeBron James dunking on you. That's kind of what it feels like to read Nabokov. And so I started reading these blurbs at first with like this sense of admiration, but later it turned into that sense I was reading Nabokov, like, oh my gosh, Writopia, stop. Writing for a living is hard enough. The competition is stiff. Stop producing these people coming along, writing this great stuff. One of the images stuck with me. A young woman, I think she was 10, 12 years old, talked about how she cut her finger, the character cut her finger, and she was dripping red pearls of blood all over Mama and Papa's yard, all over the grass. A beautiful image that sticks in your head. I wrote a book called The Storytelling Animal. That's what I'm going to talk about today. And the book gets in on this really old and basic debate, simple debate. And the debate is, what is a human being? What is it? What is it that most sets our species apart from the rest of the creation? And you call the species Homo sapien, that's an argument in the debate. And the argument is, well, it's our sapience that sets us apart. Sapience means wisdom. It's our intelligence. It's our big brains. But other philosophers, other scientists say, no, really, if you look at the research, humans don't actually behave in a very rational, logical way most of the time. Really, it's our upright posture that sets us apart, or it's our opposable thumbs, or it's the sophistication of language, or the sophistication of culture. And I'm not here to argue against any of that. All of those things are important. I'm here to say that one thing of equal stature has been left off of this list, and that is the way that human beings live their lives inside stories. So Homo sapien, yeah, it's a pretty good definition for the species, but Homo fictus, fiction man, that's about equally accurate. Man is a storytelling animal. Let me give you a little bit of a sense for what I'm talking about. It's the 1940s. There's these two psychologists named Hyder and Simmel, and they come up with this very short, very crude animated film. They show it to 120 people, and at the end they just ask them this really very simple question. What did you see? We're going to watch this film now, and at the end I'm going to ask you that same question. We'll see if we can actually replicate this experiment that was done in the 1940s. We'll watch the film, and you can tell me what you saw. Okay. So, looking at that film, who sees a story? Like, it's just shown by a show of hands. Who sees a story? Okay, just about everybody has a hand up. Who sees a story where the big triangle is the bad guy? And every question I ask, a few hands will go down. Who sees a story with this sex ratio? 2 males and a female. The triangles are male, the circle is female. Again, it goes down, question after question. The more specific I get, the more hands go down. The most, did anyone mind sharing their story with me? Anybody raise a hand, who will share their story? Anybody? You raise your hand, too.
Yeah. What did you say?
I just saw the big triangle bullying the little triangle chasing the circle around, and then they got the circle and the little one kind of got it.
Do you have any more specific characterization of who these people were or anything like that? Anybody have a more specific kind of story?
The big triangle was the parent, and the two were the children of different types, but one was trying to come in. The big triangle was protecting.
Yeah, good. Who sees a love story? Like the big triangle is the bad guy, the little triangle, the little circle, they're the couple, they're trying to live happily ever after. That's the most common response. The second most common response is something along the lines of what you gave, a basic family dynamic story. Usually big triangle is bad daddy, he's oppressing the family in some way. But what was interesting about the original experiment, which by the way we've just basically replicated, was out of 120 people, only 3 of them gave a truly reasonable, rational, Homo sapien style response. What did I see? I saw triangles, circles, moving around on a blank background. That's it. That's all I saw. Everyone else sees a story. They see a little romance, a little epic, a little tragedy, a little drama. And this really simple experiment, it's one of my favorite experiments in science, is so powerful for what it does. What it does is it isolates and captures the storytelling mind in action. It's not only that all of us here are capable of taking those raw, crude cues and turning them into this rich, confident story. It's that most of us can't not do it. You can't not do it. You just do it automatically, reflexively. And it's also important that we're all seeing different stories. If we were all seeing the same story, it would just mean that you were really good at digesting a story that the scientists were feeding to you. The fact that we all see a different story means that you are not so much consuming a story here or experiencing a story here, you are creating the story. And you're doing it effortlessly and on the fly. You're creating the fiction. And of course, none of this this experiment isn't about how the human mind responds to animation. That's not what it's about. What it's about is, this is what you are doing all the time in your life. You have all this data coming into your head, and your mind is struggling always to impose the order of story structure on the chaos of your life. So we know the story of Peter Pan. He's the boy who won't grow up. But we're all a lot more like Peter Pan than we know. We never really leave the land of make-believe behind. We just change how we do it. So instead of the little kids will dream up their own scenarios, act them out, grown-ups enter into scenarios created by other people. Just through this screen alone, this device alone, the average American is getting more than 4 hours of storytelling per day. That leaves out paper novels, that leaves out your iPad and your computer, all that other stuff, just through this screen alone. That means that we're just addicted to news stories and sex stories and sports stories and murder stories and the interactive stories of video games where you get to be the character inside the movie. and reality stories. This is one of the jackasses from Jersey Shore, and commercial stories, and the holy stories that are at the center of all the world's religious traditions. And then, of course, there's the stories that artists tell in stone, that they tell in song, that they tell in paint, that they tell in dance. You go to sleep at night. It's a very reasonable thing to do. You get your rest. But what does your brain do? It doesn't go to sleep. It stays up the night long telling itself stories. It's amazing. About 2 hours per night, you are spontaneously scripting and screening these little films in the theater of your mind. And stories at the center of our social lives. You get the point. Story's ubiquitous. Story is powerful. Humans live inside a storm of stories. Stories how we learn and think. It's how we communicate with each other and connect with each other. Without story to organize your own personal experience, what would your life be like? It would be a blooming, buzzing confusion. So what I want to do is pivot a little bit now and ask a why question. Why are stories this way? Why are stories so powerful? And to help us imagine this, I want you to imagine that you live in Paris. It's 1896. And you're walking down the street to see something that you've heard about but never experienced for yourself. You walk out of these hot, bright streets and you go into this cool, dark theater and you sit in a chair that's a lot like the chair you're sitting in now. You look up at a screen that's a lot like the screen you're looking up at now. And at some moment, the screen explodes in light. And it's like this window has been ripped open on an alternative world. And what you see through that magic window is terrifying to you. You're at one of the world's first public film screenings. The film is called The Arrival of the Train. It's by the Lumiere brothers. We're going to watch just a little bit of it right now. That's the train arriving. Nothing much happens. Train rolls up at the station. A lot of people in funny outfits mill around. That's about it. And it wasn't scary, was it? But according to film lore, for this first audience who sees this film, the film is so terrifying that they leap up out of their chairs and they stampede for the back of the theater. They didn't want to get run over by that train. Never seen a film before. Now, film historians have cast a little doubt on this. I think the story's kind of exaggerated. But whether the story's true or not, it doesn't really matter for our purposes. What matters is what the story is trying to say. It's saying that those people, those Parisians, they were rubes. They were really unsophisticated about the illusion of films. But now, 100 years later, we're very sophisticated about film. But are we? Let's look at one more clip. This is from the film franchise Paranormal Activity. It shows you what's happening on screen, and it shows you what's happening in the theater. It's really great to hear with the sound because people are literally shrieking and screaming and calling for their mothers. They're so terrifying. So what's going on here? You know, these people aren't idiots. This isn't their first film. You know, they know that everything they're seeing up there is fake. They know the blood is ketchup. They know there's no axe murderers in the theater. So the question is, why are these people treating these fake things as though they are real? And there's some interesting neuroscience on this. The neuroscience of the brain on a story. So you can take a person, you can actually slide them into an fMRI machine that watches the brain while the brain watches the story, or reads the brain while the brain reads the story. And when you do that, you find something really interesting. The brain looks less like a spectator on the action than a participant in the action. So Clint Eastwood's up on screen, he's angry, your brain looks angry too. The scene is sad, your brain looks sad too. Not like you are sitting back passively registering someone else experience those emotions, but you're actually experiencing those emotions. And that's what we see in that paranormal activity clip. The people are treating fake things like real. They are doing these little dances in their chairs like they're trying to avoid whatever's attacking them. They're screaming, people screaming, it's a reflex, it's a call for help. I like it when they pull in their elbows and curl in their knees. You know, they're balling up to protect their vital organs. Their brains are telling their bodies to do all the things that they would do if they were actually under mortal threat. It's a neat insight. So stories are so powerful for us, at least in part, because whatever's happening on the page or the stage or the screen isn't just happening to them, it's happening to us as well. We know it's fake, but that doesn't stop unconscious parts of our brains from processing it like real. So summing up here, I wanted to leave you with a couple of my favorite images of the storytelling animal in action. You guys remember this? These are Tungsan Bushmen from 1947. The picture's called The Storyteller. And our storyteller, of course, is the guy in the middle of the picture. He's got his arms up in the air like he's a wizard, like he's a conductor. And he's controlling all of the thoughts in those people's heads, all of the feelings in their hearts. He brought his people together, skin up against skin, mind up against mind. And he's exerting this enormous power. And he's doing so without any 3D graphics, you know, just his hands, his face, and his story. And I don't have anything smart or scientific to say about this, just that I think this is quite wonderful. That's the kind of animal that we were. And it is the kind of animal that we still are. An animal that helplessly needs stories in the best times and the worst times. So these are storytelling animals from London. They're living during the Blitz. They're living in this time of real fear, privation, and danger. And yet here they are. What a great picture. They're picking through the bombed out remains of this library in search of the solace of story. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.